Venezuela has been very dangerous with drugs and with other things.
Venezuela had long been described in blunt terms: dangerous, chaotic, fertile ground for narcotics and shadow networks. One early morning, under a moonless sky and thick mountain mist, a squad of U.S. special operators lay motionless above the western border, while an MQ-9 Reaper traced the valley below with cold, unblinking sensors. 10 heavy trucks crawled along narrow switchbacks, each trailer sheathed in steel and disguised as agricultural freight. From a distance, they looked ordinary. From the drone's feed, they were ghosts of heat and metal. Small thermal anomalies, faint engine signatures, and metallic reflections that betrayed the presence of hidden compartments. In the hush that only special operations know, a single whispered command fell: "Green light on my mark." For a heartbeat, everything held. Then the tension snapped and the night's decision unfolded. What began as an interdiction quickly revealed itself as something far bolder. Why would a cartel gamble everything on one convoy? Why would U.S. forces risk penetrating so deep into foreign terrain? The answers were buried in the convoy's freight: 76 tons of meth, $220 million in fortified crates, and a logistical confidence that read like arrogance. Cartels rarely consolidate that much product in a single shipment, unless they believed, or were told, they wouldn't be touched for months. U.S. agencies aligning DEA tradecraft with Southcom's reach and elements of JSOC's patience had stitched together a map from 1,000 small clues: pings from GPS units, fuel buys at remote pumps, offshore wire transfers, and encrypted chatter. These pieces converged until the only viable route through which the empire moved its product pointed like a finger at that lonely mountain highway. Washington concluded the risk of delay was greater than the risk of action. If the cartel rerouted, reinforcements could arrive. If they moved again, the trail would go cold. So the decision came: strike now, strike decisively, and strike with the full measure of coordination modern warfare could deliver. At 2:26 a.m., the operation went from watchful patience to kinetic precision. The Reaper kept its feed steady as Apache attack helicopters rolled their sensors in, and 2 Ranger squads and a SEAL element folded into the trees, readied to move. In 12 minutes, the battlefield choreographed itself, aircraft and ground teams moving in an almost clinical rhythm. Hellfire missiles and 30 military cannon fire carved the lead vehicles to ruins. The front of the convoy became a blossom of flame that lit the fog like a second dawn. Tracer lines stitched the dark as cartel gunners returned fire with PKMs and RPGs. But every muzzle flash was a beacon to the Apaches. Each time the enemy tried to respond, they exposed themselves further and the strike answered. The tactic was classic Overwatch: fix the column in place with overwhelming pre-registered fires, then close with ground teams to secure evidence and capture survivors. The intent was speed and shock. Leave no margin for the convoy to disperse or for reinforcements to link up. But nothing in war ever behaves exactly as planned. Midway down the column, a single armored hauler emitted a brief and coded panic burst, an emergency beacon that could mobilize scouts, warn outposts, or trigger roadblocks. The signal forced the assault into a faster tempo. Operators tightened. The Reaper widened its scans, and flank teams hardened their approach. What might have been a careful dismantling turned into a race against time. One truck, packed with compressed meth, took a direct hit and detonated catastrophically, spewing a chemical inferno 100 meters high. The blast broke the convoy's cohesion, scattering fighters, killing and wounding many, and bathing the valley in a searing orange light. In the chaos, the Rangers surged, overlapping fields of fire while SEAL teams secured the rear. The dance of white-hot silhouettes under the drone's infrared feed looked otherworldly, heat blooms marking explosions, operators moving methodically through flares of smoke, and a battlefield that a few hours earlier had been a quiet road through the jungle. When the dust settled enough to allow a systematic sweep, the natural question nagged. Too many trucks remained intact, engines still warm but no drivers in sight. Retreat patterns looked unnaturally clean, as if a portion of the force had melted into the forest rather than been destroyed. Had the convoy been bait to draw attention away from something larger? Pushing north along a razorback ridge, the teams followed ghostly infrared markers until the Reaper's feed revealed an anomaly: geometric lines beneath the canopy where there should have been unbroken trees. There, Tucked into the mountain sat 8 concrete bunkers linked by steel walkways and covered in camouflage netting. Ventilation shafts, backup generators, reinforced blast doors. The air was thick with solvents and ozone. This was no ramshackle jungle lab, but a hardened, engineered complex capable of industrial production. Inside, centrifuges and distillation units resembled pharmaceutical equipment more than criminal trappings. Forensic teams cataloged the scene with clinical thoroughness. Stacks of sealed barrels, crates labeled with false shipping codes, piles of bundled cash in dollars and euros, and rows of hard drives and encrypted laptops that mapped a financial web stretching well beyond local borders. The digital ledgers uncovered, later traced through shell firms in Hong Kong, property fronts in Panama, and logistics intermediaries registered in Istanbul, showed how dirty money flowed into legitimate markets within weeks. Equipment bore serial numbers from manufacturers half a world away. Components traced to suppliers in Shenzhen and other distant factories had been routed through middlemen to dodge export controls. The discovery reframed the raid. This was not merely a blow to a regional gang, but an incision into a transnational machine that welded technology, capital, and corruption into a resilient criminal economy. Demolition teams moved with grim efficiency. Generators were silenced with shaped charges, lights died, flashbangs cracked the night, and operators swept room by room until 22 cartel members lay bound and exhausted. Among them was a heavyset man later identified as El Toro, the field commander whose capture sent shockwaves through the cartel's command network. Before withdrawing, teams photographed every vat, cataloged every mixer, and sealed evidence crates for airlift. Then, in a sequence timed to limit collateral damage while guaranteeing destruction, explosives collapsed the bunkers, fire rolled through the tunnels, steel doors folded inward, and the mountain's face opened into a trembling collapse that buried machinery, documents, and the infrastructure that had made the cartel profitable. When the final blast echoed into silence and the AC-130 made its last pass, the area pulsed only with the slow cooling of debris. 60 fighters were confirmed dead or captured. The rest melted into the jungle, leaderless, disoriented, and unarmed. In the weeks after the strike, the effect rippled through markets and financial channels. A dramatic drop in meth flows through regional hubs, dormant accounts linked to shell companies frozen, and a collapse of a once robust trafficking artery. For Washington, the operation argued for a new logic in counter-narcotics, not merely intercepting shipments but dismantling the infrastructure, labs, logistics, finance, and digital platforms that allowed illicit empires to thrive. There was no press conference, no coordinates released. The Pentagon quietly confirmed a successful international counter-narcotics action. Venezuelan officials issued denials, but the message sent across the underworld was unmistakable. Geography was no longer a shield. Drones, satellites, data, and precision strike capabilities had turned distance into fragile cover. For cartels from Mexico to West Africa, the operation was a lesson. The reach and resolve to strike deep and vanish before dawn exist, and the rules of engagement had changed. Yet amid the tactical triumph lingered a strategic question. Would the next phase of this shadow war move deeper into South America's wilds, or would it follow the money into international financial centers and boardrooms? The sting left by the TACRA operation was both demonstration and deterrent. It was a reminder that power, when married to speed and intelligence, can erase empires in hours. But it also underscored that dismantling a network is a campaign that must continue across borders, bank accounts, and bureaucracies if the victory is to last.